Hey folks, good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. I'm Alan Saunders. It is Wednesday, August 27th. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a 53-man roster that they're probably going to change. I wrote this morning at SteelersNow.com about quarterback Will Howard and how he's probably ending up on the injured reserve. Could also say that about cornerback Dante Kent, and I would expect to see guys like James Pierre and Chuck Clark re-signed. We talked about that a little bit on the afternoon drive with yesterday with Smitty, but the other part of this is the Steelers are still looking for outside additions, especially at the wide receiver position. And the big name that dropped last night, reported by Aaron Wilson of KPRC in Houston, is that the Steelers and the San Francisco 49ers are the two teams in the running to sign former Green Bay Packers and other team wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling. MVS played 4 years for the Green Bay Packers when he was drafted there out of USF in 2018 and spent those 4 years catching deep balls from Aaron Rodgers better than just about anybody ever has. That alone makes him an interesting fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers for two reasons. One, the obvious, a connection with Aaron Rodgers. Not that I think that's been a priority for the Steelers. You haven't seen a ton of old Aaron Rodgers buddies come to town like you did with the New York Jets. But the other part of this is the deep ball. The Steelers have been looking at bringing in Gabe Davis in the free agent market, have not been able to get him signed for one reason or another. But when you think about Gabe Davis, you think of a bigger bodied guy who can go downfield and stretch the defense. That is exactly what MVS is. He's 6'4". He ran a 4.37 40 coming out of college, is the current NFL active leader in yards per reception at 17.4. Very simply put, he's a guy that can run a lot of cardio and create a lot of space. He's never been a high-volume target guy and probably never will be. The Steelers aren't going to be a high-volume target passing offense for anyone other than DK Metcalf. I feel pretty good about that. When you're looking at this role the Steelers have for a number 2 wide receiver, you could call it, or a Z wide receiver, look, number one, the targets are going to be DK, Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Jalen Warren, and then maybe whoever they sign for this role. Or maybe Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, then whoever they sign for this role. Like the slot receiver is going to be involved too. But the point is, the reason this is a good fit, the reason the Steelers have been looking at this type, at Gabe Davis and now at MVS, is the ability to be a field stretcher from an outside wide receiver alignment. They don't have that or don't want to have that in anyone else they have. They don't want DK Metcalf to just be that. They want DK Metcalf to be able to be a well-rounded receiver. Some of his best attributes are his hands in traffic, his yards after the catch. He uses his size to beat zone coverage because if you're not sticky to him, then he's wide open, basically. And so you're taking away a lot of what makes DK Metcalf if you use him as your primary field stretcher in a defense. And you need someone to create depth, to make cover 3 corners bail, to keep cover 2 safeties wide, to make room underneath between the safeties and the linebackers in zone coverage for players like Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. Big play to Roman Wilson in the preseason is a deep cross. And Scotty Miller ran a flag. Now, in the regular season, I don't think a safety is going to have the fear in their heart of Scotty Miller to get deep enough to let Roman Wilson get open underneath it. You need someone there who is a legit touchdown scoring threat every time they step on the field that a defense has to be worried about to create the depth in the defense to let Roman Wilson eat. That may not be a very high volume target role. It may be mostly cardio. But that is something that MVS can do. Now, there are definitely downsides. I'm not saying he's a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, one of it is just he's 30 years old, and even in that role that we're talking about that he's a good fit for, he's certainly not as good at it as he once was. But I think when you look at the way he's aged, he has retained most of the abilities that make him what he is. Still 78% of his snaps were on the outside last year, 21.6 yards per reception last year between the Bills and the New Orleans Saints. That's pretty darn good. He's played with Rodgers. He's played with Josh Allen. He's played with Patrick Mahomes. He's gone and won 2 Super Bowls. I'm not saying that's the end of the world for a wide receiver, but I think it's an interesting perspective that adds to a group that, after Robert Woods was cut, doesn't have any of those. And So, yeah, would a player like Jacoby Myers, who is a more well-rounded, legitimate number 2 receiver, be better? Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, Myers is 6'4", but he's 6'2". He didn't run a 4.37, but he's fast enough. He can do other things in addition to being your cardio guy that runs down the field and stretches defenses. But the Raiders don't want to trade him. And if they don't want to trade him, it's probably going to have to be an overpay, which I don't need to tell you how Omar Khan feels about overpays. And also, we talked yesterday about the relative preciousness of those draft picks. If the ask is a day 2 pick, the answer is going to be a hard no. The Steelers aren't going to do that. And so they need those picks to move up for a quarterback, and they know it. And they will gladly go into the regular season without a wide receiver to keep that plan alive and in place. So I think a guy like MVS looks like a really attractive option. The other team that was mentioned by Aaron that's involved in him is the San Francisco 49ers, so it won't be easy for the Steelers to sign him, which should also tell you this is a guy with some juice left. If the 49ers, another team that styles itself as a contender, also want to sign him. So, yeah, not the most exciting name, but I think when you look at what he brings to the table, starting to look like a pretty attractive option at this point in time. You're not going to get an all-pro on waivers on August 27th, but MVS might do the trick. I wouldn't think that would necessarily be the only move they could make either. I think they'll try to add another wide receiver some other way, whether that's on the practice squad or somebody gets Scotty Miller cut. But I think this 6th receiver, the first one, will just be a pure addition to that room, and that they'll cut a player from another position to make that happen. All right, that's all I got from today. Practice on the south side with the 53 at a little after 11. And then we will be back here on the YouTube channel, Steelers Afternoon Drive, me, Smitty, at 6 o'clock. Until then, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and enjoy.